New Year's resolution. I think we're going to make an intro video. I think we need an intro and an outro for 2026. So that's something I'm going to work on. Oh my goodness. I had the show on another thing and it came into my feed. How about that? I'm here with Dakota as I always am. Dakota, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right, brother, man. We're nice and snowed in out here and on the East Coast, but I'm doing good.
On the West Coast, I'm not snowed in, but it feels like I'm snowed in. We're in the 30s, and for us, that's pretty cold.
Yeah, bro. We're in the teens. I'm not trying to do the it's colder here, but I do feel your pain.
Yeah, they definitely can say it's colder where you are. We're gonna probably start with Diego Pacheco. Diego fought last night. He got dropped, first time ever, he said. Sparring amateurs, first time he's ever been dropped by Kevin Sadjo. I was there ringside. I'm curious your thoughts about this fight. From sitting at home.
Well, if I can ever get my hair to, make a decision today, but as far as Diego's performance, man, listen, it's complicated. I over the course of his last couple fights have watched people call his performances lackluster and not entirely understood what they meant. I felt like he's fought good, disciplined fights, that he wins rounds very effectively behind the jab. And yeah, maybe it's not the most exciting style in the world, but it's very effective and it's going to be very difficult to beat. But what we saw in this fight, and then we can talk about the why after, but what we saw in this fight was his inability to keep Sadjo off of him really after like the fourth or fifth round. And we saw Sadjo make it a really physical fight, make it a really close fight. In my view, I thought it was pretty up in the air coming down to those last two rounds with the knockdown especially. And then that rally Diego had in the 11th round, that little volley of shots was really like kind of saved the momentum of his career. It was like a very needed moment. Lands that big combination in the 11th, wins the 12th pretty convincingly, and I think just edges it out, even if the judges' scorecards don't necessarily show that. But yeah, man, I mean, a lot of things about the performance are like, there's things about that fight they really couldn't have gone any worse for something that goes into the win column. But he also showed, the fighter's character.
What do you take with it? What was your gut feeling?
I just think my gut feeling was I saw a lack of snap. I mean, I'm going to say a lot of the same things that I say about a lot of guys. I saw a lack of snap. I saw a guy whose body looked dry for a little bit. He's a 6'4" super middleweight. He's 24 now. He's starting to get a little older. Maybe he's filling into his man body. I just didn't see the snap or the reaction time that I'd want to see from a guy his caliber. And so maybe try at least doing a fight at light heavyweight and seeing what the result is might not be the worst thing in the world. I think also what he said after the fight, about losing a grandmother type figure in his life. There's no way that doesn't impact the performance, right? So I think that he's a young guy who had some tragedy in his life, and I think that does deserve grace to some extent. We've seen that affect a lot of different fighters, and I do respect the dig down he showed in those last two rounds. But in terms of everything that's not his character, I see a guy that should move up in weight.
Yeah, it was a weird performance, and I also shout out to everybody in the chat. I look up and we got 22 people tuning in live. So thank you guys for jumping in. Our guy Mankey Crazy, yo, Pacheco didn't stop, didn't turn Sadjo and punch. I'm driving, so I put this show on now. Clark showed he can take Holloway's punches. His chin is suspect. Thank you, Mankey Crazy, for being on while you're driving. We really appreciate that. We hope to give you a good show.
And drive safely, my friend.
For me in this fight, first off, ringside, you really have to have a lot of ringside reps for close competitive fights to accurately see it. Sometimes I wish I had a monitor so I could go between the monitor and the action I'm seeing, because, for example, Vaca versus Cardenas on the undercard, I had it Vaca 2-1, and judging by people I talked with that had monitors, it was actually 2-1 or 3-0 Cardenas, but I was unable to see those clean punches by my angle because they were to the back of me. So my gut feeling was Diego did pretty good, but Sadjo was aggressive and relentless, and he really had the momentum of the fight, especially with the knockdown. I thought this was a very, very close fight that Diego probably won in rounds 11 and 12. Yep. I think it spoke to his character that he hurt Sadjo in the 11th round after some adversity. But the one thing that I thought, and Diego kind of spoke to this after the fight, it was different, was Diego usually makes fights look easy and kind of boring. And he was in this fight, it's either Sadjo is really, really good at getting by people's jabs, or this wasn't the same Diego. And unfortunately,
I think he is. I think it's both, right? Because I think that Sadjo did do a good job of relentlessly cutting off that distance and keeping that pressure on and forcing Diego to do things that he didn't want to do. But I also felt like in the 4th round or so that the jab stopped being as busy and he sort of acquiesced to that style, and then it became, how does he survive in that style? Whereas I don't know that he would have had to survive with a different approach and maybe with some better snap and a little bit better reaction. I just didn't see the snap and the reaction.
Also thought Sadjo was pretty tricky with the use of his head.
Yep.
And there were a lot of clashes, and this is not a video game, and head clashes can disorient someone. And my thoughts, being ringside, was maybe Diego's a little shook up from a head clash. He got cut in the 6th round from an accidental butt. I also felt that, maybe there's a bit of disorientation from the physicality that made it so he couldn't. I think that look, Diego's had a career where he's fought top tier guys and made the fights look relatively easy. This is the first major adversity he's faced, and I feel like people are being very critical of him when all he's done is given people good fights, challenged himself, etc. And honestly, I thought it was pretty impressive, the fact that he didn't wilt. He gets knocked down, he gets up, he responds with championship merit. And after the fight, he wants Munguia. In the post-fight press conference, he was pretty adamant that the Munguia fight is the fight that they are looking for. And I think that that's a fight that's very winnable for Diego.
I think it's a fight that's very winnable. I think that Sadjo is going to give a lot of guys a tough fight. And like I said, in terms of all of the character things, I think Diego checked those boxes. In terms of me watching his skills in this fight and how he responded to a style this physical, I just didn't love how he reacted to it. I didn't love that there was a lack of snap in his punches and a lack of reaction time. I felt like he looked more hittable in this fight than he typically has. He's always been a pretty good guy on the defensive end. And as much as you have to credit Sadjo, I'm not taking anything away from him. I think that there were things that I expected to see from him that I just didn't see a guy that maybe was as sharp as we've seen him before.
Cautionary or a lesson learned?
I think it depends on what you do with it, right? Like if I think it can be cautionary. Like if you have a performance like that and then you to me, and then you continue to do everything the same way, I don't know that that's going to, as he continues to move up in competition, which he deserves to do, I do think something has to change. I'm not in his life to know what that is, but I would suspect, even if that's just keep growing and getting better, which he seems committed to doing.
I think one of the storylines people might jump to is that he has a new team. It's not really a new team. Coach Omar was with him originally. He was an assistant coach. This isn't really a new team. This is the group of people that essentially really liked Diego, knew him really well. He was with the Benavidez's. He's back in Los Angeles with basically the people he was with originally. So I think that, some people might point to the new team. Maybe there's some growing pains. But I truly don't think that's it, because this is a group of people that really know him, and he had success with that style before. So I don't know. What do you think to that component? Because I do think there'll be people that'll go, this is his hardest fight. Jose Benavidez Sr. wasn't in his corner. Is that the reason?
I generally don't think that was a part of this fight, to be honest. When I'm watching this guy, and can you remind me of the trainer's name?
It's Coach Omar. I always mess up the last name part.
When I'm watching Coach Omar, I feel like he's telling Diego what I would want to hear, what I would tell him, or what I would want to hear somebody tell him. I see him being poised. I don't see him panicking, right? But there is a certain amount of urgency in how he's talking. But I didn't see any panic. I saw two guys that knew each other pretty well, and I felt like, he was doing what he could do to guide Diego through a very tough physical fight.
Yeah. Co-feature Gabriel Flores Jr. loses to Joe Cordina in kind of an ugly physical fight. What were your thoughts on this?
Yeah, man. I mean, I thought that Gabriel had some good rounds early, and in the middle rounds, round 7, he had a nice little round, but it just felt like in general that I think to some extent, as I expected, that Cordina's level of physicality and just sort of like he's just sort of built for that type of combat at a certain level. And I felt like he just, especially like Diego did, in those last 2 rounds, he separated. I felt like it was a pretty close fight through 10 also. And I felt like Cordina's that stand he took in 11 and 12, he really separated himself. I don't think that you're starting to see the miles on Cordina too. Like, I think there's some difficulty for him in terms of reacting, but he was ultimately the one that was able to make the adjustments and land, I would just say, like, the sturdier shots. It just feels like a lot of, as much as Gabriel, you can see there's skills there. Sometimes it just feels flimsy to me. That's the best word I could use to describe it, is it's just a little flimsy. And Cordina was just able to be more assertive in general.
The big thing I saw ringside, I thought it was about an even fight through 10. It's about even, maybe 6-4 either way. Keep in mind, I don't have a broadcast. I'm not seeing it. And I'm sure Sergio and Corey Erdman and Mannix did a great job on the broadcast. They always do a good job. And it's very hard calling fights, by the way, because the whole nation watches your fight and thinks they can do a better job than you. And you're watching it in real time and you don't know how things are going to play out. It's not an easy job at all. The big thing to me was Gabriel has never been in the 11th and 12th round. And it felt like that 11th round, the flurry Cordina had in the 11th round really won the fight. Because for Gabriel to win the 12th, he needed to separate, kind of, because I think the judges, because that round was so big, not that people have bias, but when you have a big 11th round, if it's a very even 12th round, I think people are still going to remember that 12th round and go, that was a pretty big 12th round.
Well, and I think it was a pretty big 12th round for Cordina, to be honest. I mean, Gabriel was competitive and fought his heart out, but I thought that Cordina won the last 2 rounds very cleanly.
But I think that those championship rounds, I think it's hard to get your first 12-round fight against a world-class fighter. And I think that also speaks to kind of the level Abdullah Mason's at, where his first 12-round fight was against a world-class fighter. And to me, I don't know. There was just, I'll say what I said before the fight, and it played out to be true. There was a lot of emotion with both fighters, and it turned into a kind of ugly, odd fight with a lot of tension and a lot of high stakes and emotion. But neither guy really punches in combination. So that it never really had that, and it kind of had a you go, I go feel, where Flores was landing his punches and then Cordina would either take it or try to come through. Interesting. I thought Cordina won clearly. Round 11 came close to getting the stoppage. Rambler said Cordina won clearly and they booed him. Well, I mean, to say that, it's like Cordina fought Gabe Flores in his hometown of Stockton, where Gabe's been known for a decade plus. And if you beat a guy in his hometown, you're not going to get embraced unless you just have an amazing performance. So, I mean, that's just kind of what happens. Our guy, Mr. Singh, said it should have been a draw. I mean, I think this is a fight. It's kind of like the weirdest type of fight where both people probably leave the fight thinking they won. And I think that you don't really feel great about Joe Cordina's chances against Abdullah Mason after seeing this fight. because it just kind of felt, I don't know, it felt like a second gear fight. Like you were looking to see more gears, and they just kind of were in second gear. And to me, it kind of showed where both guys were at.
Definitely. I definitely think they were able to use each other as a measuring stick. But to be honest, man, I feel like, this is my opinion, if Gabriel feels like he won that fight, that might be part of the problem. Because I think at times there's such great pieces, but he doesn't sustain stuff throughout rounds. And even the 7th where he boxed beautiful, like he gets cracked a bunch in that last 30 seconds. And I almost have to like wonder if I'm giving him the round. Like what was a clear round becomes was that his round? And so I think if him as a 25-year-old guy, you know, is still looking to grow and whatever, I just think if you think you won that fight, that might be a problem.
Yeah, I mean, there's things to it. It definitely, the career trajectory definitely takes a turn after a fight like that, for sure. Ernesto Tito Mercado stops Antonio Moran. I was pretty impressed with this, and I'll tell you why. Mercado, to me, Moran was a lot bigger than Mercado in person. Mercado, actually, I was surprised. He is a good size for the weight class, but he's very lean. And I thought the physicality of Moran, coming off a win over Mikewan Williams, Moran kind of has a little bit of that. He gets dropped and then he gets going. And if you can't really stop him, he's like the zombie. And I said it on Twitter in the movie. He's like a zombie film. You know, he takes you to the house and you get trapped and he's just trying to kick in the door. And Tito walked him into a right hand in the first round and nearly knocked him out. And then he said afterwards he wanted to go rounds, which, you know, he didn't fight that often this year. And he wanted to go rounds before he's calling out big names. And he stops him later in the fight. And I thought it was I think Tito Mercado is a very interesting up and comer because he's having the performances and he's talking crap to make you wonder how he'll do in those big stages.
Yeah, man. I mean, to me, it was the performance of the night. I thought he took a very competent contender and made it look pretty easy, hurt him early, did a great job of keeping his distance. And even though I think Moran maybe didn't take this same exact approach he always does, he was very dangerous in there. He was trying to land to the body. He was trying to win the whole time. And to see Mercado, you know, be that dominant against that guy coming off his career best win, I feel like that was a massive statement.
I also think that getting dropped in the first round changes your mentality.
Sure.
Like the way I don't know how it looked on TV, but there was snap on that shot, and it made a lot of people at ringside stand up.
It definitely. I was looking at him, and I was like, he doesn't fight in the same style, but he kind of delivers his punches like how Barrera used to. There's a real free whipping quality to them, where he's very loose with how he throws it, and it just all looks very natural.
Yeah, he's very much fluid in his punches, and it's
man.
interesting because he doesn't look the part of a puncher when you see him. Like he's not the physical, he's more of a Tommy Hearns looking puncher, but he really knows how to extend and whip his shots. And it's a unique thing because he's physically strong. He's got speed, he's got timing, but he really maximizes his frame. And it's like he really can get that snap of the punch at the end of his shot and just maximize it. And it's the speed with the ability to catch guys. You know, if he can continue to do these performances against the next level of guy, we're looking at a superstar, a star at least, but maybe a superstar.
Yeah, bro. And I thought his understanding of his range, that was more so what I was kind of looking for from Diego, was I felt like, and I don't think that Moran was applying as much pressure, but you saw Mercado knows exactly where to let his hands go. He's incredibly accurate. There was just a lot to like in this performance, man.
For another thing, being there live.
And can we talk about the fact, bro, he's really not getting hit. I mean, he's sharp on the defensive end. I know that him being a puncher is the emphasis because he is getting devastating knockouts, but he's a sharp guy. He's not an easy guy to hit.
I mean, to me, I was impressed with his feints. He did a lot of stuff where he was having Moran react to jabs that weren't coming. He was having him react. He'd jab and fake a right hand or foot feint. And a lot of those punches came because Moran was guessing wrong. And there's more to what he's doing, and
the check hooks too, man. The check hooks are beautiful. The way he punches as you're coming in, I think that deters you from coming in.
Yeah, I mean, he's a problem, and he's obviously a world-class fighter. Now the question is, can he do these type of performances against the top fighters? He's saying he can, and it's getting to the point where it seems like he needs to be in with a big name, because it doesn't seem like these gatekeepers or top veterans can kind of, provide the challenge that the TV watching audience is looking for with him. He's approaching being a main event fighter to me.
I agree.
Skye Nicolson, what did you think?
I thought Skye looked great in this performance. It took her a couple rounds to get going. There was an awkward rhythm to what Luna was doing. And she was, I think there was a little, maybe don't judge a book by its cover. There was some tricky shit she was doing early in the fight. But Skye, kind of went back to her boxing roots. And though she's been getting knockouts, she really fought her way through this fight, had a great check hook, a lot like Mercado, and won this fight going away. I thought it was a great performance.
I saw the same fight. First two rounds were really, I thought Luna won the first round. I thought Luna was off.
I think she won the first two.
The second was close. But the first, I thought Luna won pretty clearly. And Skye, basically, from what I saw ringside, her movement completely threw Luna for a loop. Like, she just could not keep up with Skye. And Skye just kind of made it into a fencing, point fighting game of landing shots. And, she basically turned it into a 10-round Olympic level amateur boxing fight, where it was just like, you've got to catch up with me. I'm going to be faster. I'm going to be trickier. And it seems like, the thing about Skye that I appreciate is she fights a lot. She lost this year, and I believe she still had 4 fights, or was that, 4 fights. So, I mean, how many fighters lose their belt and still have 4 fights? So she's very active. Seems like this fight was a very emotional win for her. You could arguably say this was the best fighter she's ever faced in her career, and she had a great performance. Ella Scottney, more than likely, is who she's going to fight next. If Ellie Scottney, I don't love that fight for Skye personally, but I'm really, really
high. That's the fight, though. That's the fight.
It is the fight, and the thing with Skye is, I think that she showed a lot this year, but this style she fought at, I think, is more of the beatable style than what I was seeing earlier. And maybe it's the level of competition. She was able to punch and be more physical with a certain level of competition. But I was really hoping to see some of that nastiness from her, because I was enjoying the nasty side, the vengeance. She was talking of a knockout. And I think that this was a win at all cost performance.
Agreed. I liked how she was able to punch moving backwards still. That's always, something I felt like she's done really well. Like Tito, she was, landing the check hook, a lot of good counter punches while she's moving backward. And I think it deterred Luna from trying to come inside. I think that's a piece, that's something she can go to when she needs it. That's how I'm looking. You know what I mean? I feel like she's expanded her skill set. She can kind of go to different things depending on what is called for.
I was sitting there and I was thinking there's a fairly decent chance she's a Hall of Fame boxer. Like, there's a fairly decent chance that, because she, to me, is getting close to the point of being a main event fighter with the amount of attention and the amount of interest people have around her as a personality. And just think about how few women's boxers can move the needle as much as her for whatever reason. And it's like, she's staying active. She's building a resume, and there's a chance she's a Hall of Fame boxer, and that was the thing. It's just, this performance was a disciplined, focused fight against a credible top contender, but it honestly wasn't exciting or interesting. And sometimes great performances are just that.
Yeah, but I mean, I think she's a main event fighter too, and I think a lot of fighters of her skill level would not accept I'm opening the card, but she wants to stay active, so she's taking those fights, even though she probably deserves better, to be honest.
I think there's a lot to like about her because she stays active, she's taking tough fights, and she's behaving like a fighter. I don't really see what you can criticize. You can criticize a performance here and there, but if they're staying active, people are gonna have bad performances here and there. It's like how a lot of times
Did you
fighters.
feel like this was a bad performance from her?
No, it was just hard being in the arena because it felt like it was like a amateur boxing where you're watching the same round over and over. So it was just hard because when you don't have a TV, when you don't have your refrigerator, you can't go and do stuff. You're just kind of watching the same stuff and you're zoning out. And
You don't
for
have
me,
your chips and salsa.
yeah,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? It was a fight where I appreciated her poise and focus, but it was a hard one to kind of assess because I figured out I believe that she figured something out and then she just kind of stayed in a certain place. She's like, "Okay, I know what you do and I can win this way and I'm not going to take any other risk because you're dangerous." And I mean, I respect that, but also at the same time I kind of checked out because it's just like I saw the same thing over and over and over. It's like watching 8 hours of USA boxing.
But some of that at times to me is on the opponent to adjust to try to do something different. And it felt like
that was there, that was obvious, but to me there was a glaring difference in foot speed. Like, it was so obvious being there that Luna just could not keep up with
what I wanted to just to run back to Diego real quick. I wanted to see some more foot speed. I wanted to see him a little more mobile. Like when Skye's moving back and she's throwing that check hook and then giving an angle. Like I just wanted to see some of that mobility from Diego to go with his beautiful punch arsenal.
Comments, Rambler, Flores looks weak, no muscle definition, not saying it's a bodybuilding competition. Eddie is sort of feasting on the scraps and leftovers of other promoters. He's got no clue. If a foreign fighter comes to the UK and clearly wins, they are rarely booed. It's hatred the Mexicans have. I think the reason Cordina was booed is Gabriel's a very popular figure in Stockton. So it's the hometown crowd that bought tickets to see the hometown guy, and they just didn't. It's a rough city, it's a rough neighborhood. Warriors Real, are we talking about MMA? Don't you guys reply to this people who they are watching the stream? We do, and we are not talking MMA. We're going to talk Anthony Joshua versus Jake Paul in a little bit. We're just giving our regular viewers kind of an update on what happened in the fight landscape because some people, this is where they get their fight news, is just from our show. So we're giving a little recap of what you missed this weekend, and then we're getting into Anthony Joshua versus Jake Paul, which I guess you could say has some ties to the MMA community. So not really talking MMA, but kind of, because there's some MMA boxing.
I think it would be safe to say that we're not talking about MMA. I think it's
there
safe to
go.
say.
Okay, so Noel Mikaelian defeated Badou Jack. He's the WBC cruiserweight champion. I did not see the fight. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I didn't see it. I know that it was a rematch, and I know that Badou has been around the block and back a couple of different times. He's 42 years old. I couldn't give you an honest assessment of the performance itself, obviously, because I didn't see the fight. But I would assume that because the scores were close-ish, that there will be a third fight.
I didn't see the fight. I was in Stockton, so I have no clue. But that happened. New WBC champion and friend of the program, Mighty Brook, defeated Gloria Munguia. Hopefully they do a trilogy because it seems like that was a really good fight. And Gloria gave her a rematch and had won earlier in the year. Hopefully maybe they can do another fight soon.
Boy, getting blown up.
Yeah. Can you say something?
I can. I didn't know how long you were going to need. Is he still on the phone? All right, Lukie's still on the phone.
No, let me. Yeah, I might have to take a phone call for a second, but let me. Yeah, what do you have to say?
Nothing. We just finished the segment.
Okay, so let's go talk about the Anthony Joshua, Jake Paul, or whatever you want to talk about this. And I'm going to step out to get something. But like, I mean, you're about as hardcore a boxing person as possible. And I think both of us believe this is a real fight. You know, people have said things, oh, it's whatever. I don't think there's any tomfoolery there, because I don't think Anthony Joshua would partake in that. The one thing you and me agree about Anthony Joshua is he's a very serious athlete, and he's always the competitor in him is a very serious guy. What are your thoughts on this fight? You know, because obviously it's a sanctioned fight, it's a competitive fight, but it kind of is like Jake Paul is a little bit crazy for, in my opinion, stepping in there with a world-class heavyweight.
Yeah, listen, I think everybody knows generally, if you watch this show, like my general take on Jake Paul, but there's no way you can take away from the chutzpah of taking this fight. I mean, it really is like kind of a crazy move. He was about to fight a career lightweight prior to this, and now he's going to fight probably like the 7th or 8th best heavyweight in the world, having never really fought at the world-class level of any weight class. And so it takes a lot of balls. It takes a lot of chutzpah. I think it validates some of his desire over the years to try to get fights with Canelo or with big fighters. And I would say, even for me, at times I felt like that was kind of a gimmick, that if he marketed himself as somebody who's moving towards taking world-class, prime athletes and being in the mix of competitive boxing, I felt like that could be used as a marketing tool to market what was otherwise gimmick fights, right? Because what we've seen is older MMA guys, we've seen NBA players, we've seen, older fighters, right? Very much older fighters. We've seen Julio Cesar Chavez, who didn't let his hands go for 7 rounds. So again, in terms of me, just as a boxing guy, there's so much I don't know about Jake Paul, and I'm not interested in the other things the way that maybe some of even our viewers are. But yeah, I mean, I think that all things being equal, that Joshua will win this fight easily. I have nothing but respect for Jake for taking the challenge and wanting to really push himself against a guy who's substantially bigger, more experienced, probably hits way harder, has been doing it every advantage in this case goes to Joshua, which is such an extreme, I think, from a lot of Jake's other fights, where most of, if not all, the advantages are going to him, even if it's framed as, oh, well, it's Mike Tyson. Yeah, but it's 60-year-old Mike Tyson. It's an old guy. It's a guy who's not really able to react, even if he is in great shape, even if he looks great on the mitts. It's different when you're actually in there. But again, that like a lot of Jake's events, I think the undercard is really strong. I think that there's a lot of talent on the undercard. I think if we're going to let's go to the Joshua side of it for a second. I think it's obvious that if he even kind of allows Jake to have moments of success during this fight, it hurts his legacy. I think much like the Ngannou fight with Fury, Fury was able to have the fights with Usyk after and be competitive, but I don't think there's any long term. I feel like that has kind of damaged what people think about Fury as a dominant heavyweight champion prior to the Usyk fights. And so I do think that even just instances and moments of success for Jake will hurt Joshua. Again, everything is in Joshua's favor on this one, just as on a boxing level. Everything is in Joshua's favor on this one. So the pressure is on Joshua, though I don't know if he's feeling that pressure, but the pressure from the boxing world is on Joshua to be dominant, to get a knockout, to kind of validate. I think a lot of traditional boxing people that are not thrilled about Jake's presence, and maybe the presence of that general circus is in town vibe that boxing has really grown and fostered over the last couple of years. So you have, two different schools of boxing fought in the modern era too, kind of coming into play in this one. But again, there's no doubt about it that not everyday average Joe is just taking this fight. And so I think a lot of the falling out of big names through the years has been validated by this. If I'm being brutally honest, it's not, I say all that to say, it's not a fight to me that's particularly interesting just as a boxing guy. But nothing but respect to Jake for taking out. I'm going to go get some water. I just talked.
And now I'm going to talk about mine. I think for me, my perspective is the intrigue is Jake is a quality cruiserweight. I think he's a fringe level contender at this point, but now he's taking on Anthony Joshua, who's a proven world-class boxer, a unified champion. And I think there's an underlying assumption by many that, that
I'll push back on something real quick.
Yeah.
What the fuck has he done to be a fringe contender at cruiserweight?
The cruiserweight division's terrible.
I know, but let
me read to you contenders. Like I'll push back on this because most fighters in boxing fight the level of opposition he fights and get ranked in the top 15. Fighting preferable.
Nobody's fighting 60-year-old men, though. Nobody's fighting 60-year-old men.
Well, but that's part of the Jake Paul experience is preferential matchups that slightly favor him, like all boxers. But there's a level of intrigue, right? That's the social media component. And that's the genius of this fight. They go from a Gervonta Davis fight, what's it going to look like, to him fighting a massively bigger guy. And I think the other thing with Jake that is interesting is he makes people have strong opinions about him. So if you give an opinion about him, negative or positive, there's people that feel both ways. There's no one that's indifferent about Jake Paul. People have an opinion one way or another. Obviously, he's not like a Jay Apataya, Zordo Ramirez, but like, I don't know, if you put him in with an older Mike Perez, what does that fight look like? I'm not aware of who
I think in general
is.
But I think in general, as a boxing guy, those would be the kinds of fights that I'd want to see to kind of check certain types of boxes. And he hasn't checked those traditional boxes. So to say that he's a fringe contender, I don't know enough about him to know if he's a fringe contender. He just fought a 40-year-old middleweight who didn't let his hands go for 7 rounds. So I feel like I don't know. I feel like that might be a reach.
I just feel like there's guys who do very similar things, but because they fight guys and people feel they're established, they're viewed as real boxers. I think Jake Paul is just showing the world how prospects are built somewhat. And people have strong opinions because they don't want him in boxing, essentially.
Yeah, but him fighting Chavez Jr. is not the same thing as Diego Pacheco fighting Kevin Sadjo. Like, it's two different things.
Well, that's just not even a comparable fight. Like, him fighting Chavez was like Diego Pacheco fighting Terry Fernandez in 2019. Those are the level of fights, right? And you'd be foolish to compare those two, right? But he's a high level developmental fighter. He's someone that brings in a lot of money, and he pays for his opponent with the amount of attendance and viewership he gets. And he can fight more than people think. He can fight. And the question now is just how good can he fight? And the level of intrigue to this bout is Joshua is a gold medal Olympian. He's a unified world champion. Everything about this fight says Joshua is going to stop him. Like, everything about it. Logic says that. And everything about Jake Paul's career has been he's had an advantage over every opponent. That's the underlying thing most people feel. And I think what's interesting to me about this is he's giving up weight, he's giving up experience, and he's fighting someone that he's unqualified to fight. And I think that's the intrigue about this fight is everything people have said about Jake, he's kind of defying it. So, like, this is why I view him as a fringe level contender is he's willing to get in there with Joshua. Like, that's what fringe level contenders do.
And by the way, when you left, I spent a good 5 minutes giving him props for having the chutzpah to take the fight. And I'm not taking any, like, not every guy is doing that, right? So I acknowledge that fully. But I think to say that he worked his way to a fringe contender and then, like, organically as a boxing guy earned this fight, I just don't take it. I don't see it that way. We lost Lukie now at this point, but I just don't see it that way. I think that it is the money, it is the audience that he brings that puts him into this position, not what he's done in the ring.
So, Warriors Reels, what are you guys talking about? Jake Paul is not a real fighter. Everybody knows that Anthony Joshua will win this fight. It's so easy for him, question marks. The fight also, a lot of comments while I left. The fight worries me a bit. If it's real, Jake could get seriously hurt, which would also damage the sport. I'm an amateur MMA fighter. My record is 8-0. Shout out to you, by the way. That's a good record. If you wanted to advise me, then what will it be? Well, I mean, my advice to you, if you're an amateur MMA fighter, is find some people that get to know you, that you believe have good intentions, that have a lot of experience in MMA, and find them to help you in the process. Because you shouldn't, in any regard, and this goes for anyone, you shouldn't go and look at YouTubers or people on the internet and take their word as gospel. You should find people that are in the gym with you training, who really genuinely care about you, and then form a team that can help you through life circumstances to guide you through different scenarios. So my advice to you would be build a team that genuinely cares about you, and from the ground up, make decisions where everyone's on the same page. Like when Sonny Edwards fought there, but Cordina made the fight and came forward, and they always have animosity about that. And then answer your viewers too. Warrior Reels, man, the issue there was I had to take a phone call about something that might be breaking news, so I had to step out for a little bit, and Dakota doesn't get the chat question, so that one's on me. I don't know. I think it's an interesting. It's not technically.
I think we're on the same page on this fight, but I think that the flip side of it is, like some of our viewers are saying, what if it is just kind of an ass whooping? What if it is exactly kind of like what your gut is telling you it's going to be? And the reality is that the kid didn't earn the fight in the ring. He earned it at the box office. And that's okay. I'm not hating on that. But to say that he did what every other fighter does to get to an elite level fight is just not true.
And you're 100% right. But the thing that he did was he built up a fan base, a huge fan base, and
right, but it's the fan base that he brings. It's not his merit.
No, but we live in an era now where, it's the know the power of your brand and stuff. So it isn't the merit of his skills, but it's the merit of his fan base. It's the merit of his brand. And I think it's also something that I give Jake a lot of credit. Every fight, he finds something that creates intrigue. Whether you like it or not, there's some form of intrigue to every fight.
And by the way, I would agree with you that when somebody says, "Oh, he's not a real fighter," I don't know that you're really watching it, because if he had no ability, there is certain things he wouldn't do that he does do. But just me, our viewers watch us, right? Because we're boxing guys. Just me viewing him that way. I wasn't on Vine in 2014. I wasn't watching him do prank videos in 2017. I don't have a decade of attachment to him the way so many of his fans and viewers do. I think that it is a potentially dangerous outing for him.
Jake has fought, this is my guy Stevie from San Jose. Jake has fought better competition in his first 10 fights than most of our favorite fighters have fought in their first 10 fights. No denying that. Jake is Jake is a boxer, but still learning, but not a bum. I think that's a fair point. I think that there's something to be said. Warriors Reels, I have good coaches. They guide me well. And we have a team. Half of our team is a brave. You guys will attract more viewers if you guys start talking about MMA. But see, here's the thing about MMA. We're not passionate about MMA. We don't have a deep passion for MMA.
And I don't know what I'm talking about with MMA. You don't want to hear me talk about MMA. Trust me. There's guys that know.
Exactly. There's great programs that have well-informed people that like and watch MMA. we don't have that passion for it. If
check
we
out
did
Brian Campbell. Check out Brian Campbell. Brian Campbell and Ariel Helwani, they both do both sports, and they do a great job.
Yeah. Jimmy Smith is someone that I've met who's at ProBox TV. I believe he does MMA stuff, and he's a nice guy, but like, I just don't have the passion. So, I mean, that, tune in here for a little boxing here and there, but I don't have the passion for that one. Let's go through this undercard. Alycia Baumgardner, Layla Baudin. Thoughts on this matchup?
I wish I knew more about Baudin. For me, because I don't know enough about the opponent, I would be watching this fight wondering what Baumgardner I'm going to see. I just haven't been impressed with what I've seen from her in a couple of years, at least since the hiatus after the drug test. And listen, I think she's one of the great talents in women's boxing in terms of her athletic ability, but it just hasn't, the pieces haven't come together for me in the last couple of fights. And I think a lot of what her focus is at the moment is like an outside of the ring persona, and that's enough.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a really hard fight because Baudin actually stopped, what's her name? The Muslim fighter that fought Alycia Baumgardner back in the day.
Mikaelian.
She stopped her in her last fight. And to me, that was a very impressive stoppage. She's trained by Samuel De Query.
Somebody who gave Baumgardner some problems. I was at that fight, and it wasn't a close fight, but it was a very competitive one.
Well, she stopped her, albeit it's a couple years later. She had a physical style. Maybe she's wearing down, but I think that still was like, oh, that's an interesting result for me. That when I saw that, I was like, that's interesting. I watched the fight. I really expected Baumgardner to do better against Jennifer Miranda. I thought that was just a very lackluster performance. I thought she'd get hit a lot. And to be quite honest, I don't think she can have that level of performance against someone like Layla, who's trending upward. She has a team around her. She's sparring Caroline Vary. She has a lot of really, really big people around her. And I think this is a crossroads fight. And it's weird to say that about a unified champion, but a lot's being asked of Baumgardner to be a star and be kind of the next face of women's boxing. She's not been all that active, and she's coming off one of the worst performances of her career. I know some people liked it, but I thought that was very close to being a draw.
Yeah, I know it was not a great outing, and I think you always get into a danger zone when the personality and the celebrity is what comes first. I just think that always has potential to be an issue. Like, sometimes I worry maybe that she's going in like the Stephen Fulton kind of direction, and that the cultural like significance that she has will be good enough, and that the in-ring performances will have sort of faltered.
That's a good point. Your 10 best active boxers. Well, we have a pound for pound list. At the end of the show, we will give you the pound for pound list. We got to run through the rest of these topics. Stevie says Alycia looked best with Tony Harrison. Looked great against top competition like Terry Harper and Michaela Mayer. Should have stayed with Tony. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And Childish Gambino said, "What's up, fellas?" So shout out to you. Undercard, we got the young phenom Jamal Harvey on the undercard. That's exciting, really good fighter. I will just ask you, does he make it out of the first round for this fight? His last fight was a first round stoppage. The guy didn't come out of the corner. Do you think he goes more than one round for this fight?
I would hope so, right? Like, you want to see what the kid is going to do as a pro, and the only way to really see that is to get rounds. But you also can't be mad at somebody for not playing with their food and being dominant.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see.
Like, on one hand, right, Berlanga getting 16 first-round knockouts in a row kind of hurt him long-term, but in the moment, it's like, what do you want to do? You want him to putz around with a decent fighter and let him get in the fight? No, he's getting,
We always talk about that. It was a gift and a curse for Berlanga because he got the stardom from this amazing feat, but he didn't get the experience he needed in world championship boxing. So when he got to those opponents like Romar Agulo, he had to go the rounds. He really should have gone on undercard rounds, but then he wouldn't have been the main event fighter he is because he wouldn't have been the guy that got all the knockouts that got the neighborhood to come to the fights. Notable undercard fights. We got Anderson Silva versus Tyron Woodley. That's 2 MMA guys boxing. It doesn't really do much for me. Then we also have a fight that does a lot for me. Chernika Johnson versus Amanda Gali. I think Gali is going to be an interesting character because she seems to talk a lot. And Chernika Johnson, I think, is a fringe star in women's boxing. I think that might just be the fight of the night. And then I have one other fight that I've circled, which is Yoka Valle's MVP debut against Yadria Bustillos. And I think that's another one flying under the radar because that is Valle's first fight with Most Valuable Promotions. And her sister Naomi actually lost earlier this year in September in her MVP debut. Do you think that either of those fights are extremely competitive?
I think, again, I think the Johnson fight probably has more chance of being competitive. I don't know enough about Valle's opponent, but I think that Valle is one of the best women's fighters in the world. And we just haven't seen her in the ring as much, since the Estrada fight. It feels like we see her every once in a while, and maybe, being a part of MVP now, we'll start to see her active more regularly. I think Chernika Johnson is a star already, to be honest. I think that her fights are aging well, right? Like the fact that she had a distance fight with Ellie that was relatively competitive is aging well as Scotty starts to become like a pound for pound type of fighter. I think the way she handled Sharetta is going to age really well. The way Sharetta's already come back and had great wins since then. So I think she's kind of there.
Okay. I'm looking over the rest of the schedule on this. Basically is a marathon fight week. So if you've ever wanted to watch boxing, this is the week to do it. On Tuesday, MVP will have a 3-fight card. It's going to have Shannon Courtenay. Remember her?
I sure do.
Jocelyn Camarillo. And Udon Mardelis, the Brazilian fighter, I believe, who got that knockout win on an undercard of an MVP show. That will be happening on Tuesday. Any thoughts on that?
I love to see them, keeping prospects active. I think that's a great thing.
Okay, then we go to Wednesday. We have your boy Tim Tszyu. He's fighting Anthony Velasquez. Any thoughts on the return of Tim Tszyu?
I'm surprised to see Tim Tszyu fighting on a Wednesday. I won't lie. That's a different trajectory than I would have taken at the beginning of 2024. But Tim Tszyu fights on. I'm interested to see what he's going to look like. There was a time not very long ago at all that I thought he was pushing being a pound for pound type of guy. So we'll see what this kind of second chapter holds for him.
Well, the opponent Velasquez is trained by Hector Bermudez, kind of a rising trainer who works with Rohan Polanco, most notably. He works with Kurt Scobie. Is there any chance that Tim gets hit and he just can't take damage the same way because he's had a rough year? Or do you think that this is going to be Tim goes back to Australia, rebuilds, and maybe in 2027 we're starting to go, maybe Tim's got it? Which one do you think is more realistic?
Just personally, I hope he's successful, but I think that the kinds of losses he's taken, the kind of punishment he's taken, getting stopped the way he did by Murtazaliev, he's fighting this type of opponent because he was already at the very top of the division, right? So it's like you're using that as a measuring stick. If I get buzzed fighting this guy, or if I can't beat this guy, then what is the next move? And I feel like that Tim Tszyu is kind of at that moment after 3 pretty devastating losses in the last year and a half or so. He is sort of in that place now of, what do I even have left?
So another fight that same Wednesday, Giorgio Visoli, one of my favorite up-and-comers in the sport, is taking on Joe Hawthorne. I'm not sure you've seen Visoli. He was on an undercard, on the Boots Ennis undercard. He, to me, stood out as a real top 10 level prospect to me because he fought James Crunch Time Wilkins, a known tough physical fighter, a guy who's made a career out of being a tough opponent, good gym guy, and he won pretty handily, and now he's going in with another top tier opponent. Do you rate him? Do you think this is like a top up and comer that's just emerging?
I got to see him first, bub. But I'll take your word for it that he's worth watching.
To me, he really has some special attributes. And I think, you look at this card, it's kind of I call this like the Matchroom developmental series. So you got kind of the usual suspects. There's no Jimmy Sands on this, who's a usual suspect, but you got Taya May Ayton, you got Luigi Buttigieg, Taylor Bevan, Adam Maka, Mosley, Rose, Courtney. They're like the usual suspects. Connor Mitchell's on the undercard. Good domestic level show. If you're
any Callums or Liams,
no Callums or Liams, but it's a good little domestic show where if you're working from home or you have a computer-based job or you're in the office, you could watch some boxing that's a decent level on a weekday. And I think that that's kind of neat. Potentially you get 2 shows. I don't know how you could watch the Tim Tszyu one, but I'm sure at some point they might have a way to watch it. Moving forward even more, let's see what we got. ProBox on Thursday. Ramon Cardenas versus Eric Robles. Your guy Mike Juan Williams is taking on Yair Valetiria, and Herbert Sosa, the Olympian, taking on Paul Kroll. Any of those matchups excite you?
Love that last matchup. Paul Kroll is always an interesting watch. That's a fun little card. I mean, I'm very excited to see Cardenas, particularly after that Inoue performance. I think that to some extent has become not a star-making performance, but it's really made him a factor in the division.
I just feel as though ProBox has built a brand where you can reliably expect a great fight. And I'm not sure if it's going to be Sosa versus Paul Kroll, which is a good one. I really think it could be Mike Juan Williams versus Yair Valetiria, because he just beat Jonathan Navarro, and that was a good win. And Williams is coming off that Moran loss. I think that's a really interesting, a lot of emotion, crossroads type bout. And I also think Ramon Cardenas, new trainer, working with Manny Robles. How do you handle being treated like a star? Like, do you show up and, I don't want to be a dick here, but was it easier to be the underdog? How does it feel to be the hunter? Was it easier to chase and have a chip on your shoulder than to now be the top guy?
Yeah.
To headline the card.
Not everybody responds great to that, but some guys.
Isn't that the exam of this fight for Cardenas? Is how do you handle that you're doing the brunt of the media? How do you handle when people show up fight night, they want the Cardenas interview?
Juicy you, yeah.
Yes. Like, how do you handle carrying the brunt of the show? And that's kind of what this fight is. And Eric Robles is a quality operator. He's been in good fights. He hasn't quite gotten to the same level of Cardenas, but this is a guy where if you have an off night, this could be a weird fight that at the worst you lose. But even if you're indifferent, people could go, is he really that good? Is he really that good? And I think that that's the goal. Is Cardenas wants to end this year strong. He wants to end with momentum to go to a big fight. He doesn't want to end with indifference.
And if you don't like Inoue, you're probably watching this fight hoping that Cardenas doesn't look good, so you can go, see, Inoue is not, all that and whatever. I will say I'm just looking at this on BoxRec, and the main event is not on the card on BoxRec. So I don't know if there's something that we don't know, or if that's just like some weird technical thing.
I don't know.
That fight is not listed.
Interesting. That is an interesting thing. Let's read some chat comments now. Tim got done dirty with that Fandora switcheroo. His team should have protected him both before the fight by saying no to a totally different opponent, and then during the fight after the cut. ProBox TV's got great fights for a free YouTube service. Best bang for your buck, says Lobster 11. Love the chat comments. A lot active show this week. Thank you to everybody. Also on Friday, we have a card happening in Africa. Lawrence Akoli, David Adele, Emmanuel Adesi, who I like. One of my favorite guys, Taiwo Bedje, said it perfectly, and Tony Yoka will all be featured on the card. Then the next day, we have a fight in Ghana with Craig Richards versus Dan Azeez and Nishant Dev. What do you think of that Craig Richards Dan Azeez fight?
I love that fight. Anytime the light heavyweight division in the UK has a lot of talent for whatever reason, that the super middleweight, light heavyweight, they generally have a lot of guys. And I think those are two of the best regional light heavyweights, including Bawatsi, including Hutchinson, Callum Smith probably being the top of that, Anthony Yard. And I love that matchup.
I mean, I have no way to rate it because they kind of occupy the same space, but the weirdest part about the space they occupy is they fight the exact opposite. So I think of Richards as a guy that snipes from the outside, and I think of Azeez as a guy who smothers and fights on the inside, and Richards on the outside. So I don't know what the fight will be. Every now and then, a fight that you have utter indifference about turns into be the best fight of the year. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but sometimes fights that I think of, was it Luis Neri Azat Hovhannissian? We had very low expectations, and then it just became the fight of the year. And I remember we did the show, and they go, "Well, shouldn't it be a fight that's more relevant?" And you go, "How?" So we're going to put footnotes on, okay, just because this was a great fight, it doesn't get to be fight of the year because it didn't have the relevancy to this viewer, Yeah, I'm excited for that. And then finally, on Saturday, Dimitri Salita returns with his final card of the year. Olivia Curry rematches Kay Scott. What are your thoughts on this?
Love that rematch. This is very much like the end of the year push to make sure everyone gets that last fight in, right?
Definitely feels that way, right?
Yeah, cramming them in real quick.
But I was hoping that you would kind of take over on that. Like, any thoughts? Like, do you? Obviously, the first fight was kind of there were flaws to it, but it was an exciting fight, right? Because they both exchanged a lot of punches. Who do you think makes the adjustment? Do you think we see the same fight? What are you thinking?
I would, if I had to guess, it's going to be basically the same fight. And then they'll both be trying harder. I'm a little surprised to see it that quickly, right? Like, it felt like that was a physical, rough enough fight that they might wait a little longer to do a rematch, but they're right back at it. And I would lean towards Curry generally. I just feel like she places her shots better. She's a little younger, but I know that Scott has some deeper pedigree and experience. She would probably need to show some of that to win this fight, though.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard fight to call, right? And then on the undercard, you got Tony Harrison returning. You've got actually a sneaky great fight with your guy Price Taylor that you've shot the Fight Life with. He's taking on Michael Polite Coffee, and that is a pretty big step up for him. So I think that's an interesting, especially because Price looked a little checked out in his last fight. And I think this is a fight where he can't joke around. Like with Robert Sims, he looked a little checked out, a little uninterested. And against Michael Coffey, this is a big puncher who I think, what was it, about 5 years ago, people thought he might be an up-and-coming prospect, and it just didn't work out. So
I think I view it as a little bit more of a lateral move with the Sims fight. Sims is a tricky guy, and Coffey hasn't had like that big win in a couple of years. But I do think it's a credible opponent, and I think Price, that people just want to see him be a little meaner. They want to see him get a little more rough with it, and I think they felt like he played with his food a little bit, and maybe he did a little, but it was ultimately still a dominant win where he won basically every round. I think we just want to see him get a little bit more rude in there.
Well, I think also when guys play with their food, I think people, you say nice, I think sometimes people look at that as lazy. I think that's a word that might be thrown around, and that can be frustrating for some people because it's like, you start to wonder, does he have that extra gear? So I think for this performance, we want to see some separation between the levels in class and stuff. That is, and then we have the WBC Grand Prix that concludes. So we got that. Kevin Ramirez is in the heavyweight final. So the 4 final fights of that series is happening. That'll happen. And then also, not to be outdone, you get a Callum fight this weekend. Callum Simpson is taking on Troy Williamson. And in the co-feature, Blair Cos versus Elliot Whale.
Well, the good news is I will have to look that Callum up because he doesn't have a signature nickname.
So basically, if you can't find boxing this week, you are in trouble, because pretty much any day this week, there's going to be a fight starting Tuesday. So any day of the week, you can find a boxing match.
And am I correct in saying that nothing we've talked about today was a pay-per-view? Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah. Every single fight this week will not be a pay-per-view. So that is also pretty good. So it's a great time to be a boxing fan. I think the whole world will be tuned in to Anthony Joshua versus Jake Paul, because it's just something that's going to grab a lot of attention, because people can't figure out what's going to happen. Like, why is this guy fighting one of the better modern heavyweights who hits extremely hard? So all eyes are going to be on that, but there are going to be great cards. Even on that card, that's a great card, but there's going to be great cards throughout the week. It's very exciting.
Salud. Thanks to everybody who watched today. We had a really great chat too.
Where can people find you this week, and what you got coming up, Dakota?
You can always find me at the Slip When We podcast. Go check out my interview with Justin Paldo. There's a clip of it on Lukie's channel. You can always follow me on ITR Boxing. You can always watch me on the Lukie Boxing Show every weekend.
Perfect. Thank you, Dakota. We are done. We only